Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to another edition of Crimes of the Week International. Authorities in the Australian state of Queensland say that a 38-year-old man is successfully in custody this week, following a terrifying hit-and-run crash that allegedly destroyed a home and left one person with serious injuries. The whole thing began just before 9:30 p.m. on January 21st, when residents of Rural Street in the Brisbane suburb of Parkridge were startled by loud sounds coming from the home of one of their neighbors. Several people rushed outside, where they encountered a harrowing scene. The house in question was engulfed in flames, and multiple people were yelling for help. One of them was a 28-year-old man who was bleeding and appeared to be badly wounded. Emergency responders quickly arrived at the scene and rushed the man to a local hospital, where he was treated for serious injuries to his legs. In the meantime, firefighters worked to extinguish the blaze. Thankfully, no one else was hurt, though it said that the house was destroyed. Police now allege that the dramatic incident was caused by a hit-and-run driver who struck the male victim before crashing into the home. The suspect's SUV reportedly collided with another vehicle in the garage before both cars burst into flames. Though the driver managed to flee the scene before authorities arrived, police say he has since been taken into custody. He was arrested the following evening in the neighboring suburb of Kingston. At the time of this recording, the suspect's identity and alleged motive have not been released. However, it has been revealed that the driver is 38 years old and is believed to know the 28-year-old victim. The 38-year-old remains in custody and has now been charged with 4 counts of arson, 2 counts of possessing dangerous drugs, and 1 count each of acts intended to cause grievous bodily harm, possessing a controlled substance, and possessing a utensil. Representatives from Brazil's military police say that a 43-year-old is facing charges this week after she drunkenly tried to steal a bus, only to almost immediately crash the vehicle and get herself arrested. According to reports, the whole thing happened at around 9:40 p.m. on January 16th, when a bus driver pulled over at a stop in São Paulo's East Zone. While getting out to hand a report to an inspector on the line, he left his keys in the vehicle's ignition. He was only gone for a few moments, but apparently that was more than enough time for 43-year-old Erica Custodio, who immediately noticed the bus was unoccupied. After climbing on board, Custodio allegedly made a beeline for the driver's seat. Fortunately, she didn't make it very far though, as after just a few seconds behind the wheel, she smashed into the back of 4 taxis that were parked in front of her, causing the bus to become stuck. In a video of the incident that was recorded by witnesses, Custodio can be heard being yelled at by the taxi drivers, who are understandably pissed about what has just happened. Custodio, however, appears to be in no fit state to communicate. The reason why became apparent when police arrived at the scene and placed the 43-year-old under arrest. She reportedly reeked of alcohol, was having trouble standing up straight, and was noticeably slurring her words. Custodio is now facing multiple charges, including theft, drunk driving, and driving without permission or license. At the time of this recording, she remains in custody. Representatives from the Royal Thai Police say that they have successfully arrested a foreign national this week, one who was convicted of a serious violent crime in Europe a decade ago, but who has allegedly been on the run ever since. According to reports, 36-year-old Akmal Usama was charged with attempted murder and firearms offenses after he went on a terrifying rampage attack in Belgium in January of 2014 during an argument with his girlfriend. The dual Moroccan-Belgian citizen was ultimately convicted and sentenced to 10 years in prison for the crime. However, before he could be taken into custody, he somehow managed to escape and promptly fled the country. While Usama's whereabouts were unknown for nearly a decade, that apparently changed near the end of last year when it was discovered that he had been hiding out on the Thai island of Phuket. More specifically, Royal Thai Police say that the 36-year-old had been working as a DJ at a nightclub in the popular resort town of Patong. At the time of this recording, the exact circumstances of Usama's capture have not been released, though Thai authorities say that he was recently arrested at the apartment where he had been living. The 36-year-old remains in custody and is now awaiting extradition back to Belgium, where he will finally be forced to serve his sentence. Authorities in Uruguay say that a man allegedly responsible for a chilling triple murder is finally in custody this week after he went on the run and attempted to hide from police, but accidentally gave away his location when he got a hankering for pizza. According to reports, the awful crime took place at around 12:30 p.m. on December 23rd, when two armed suspects stormed into a warehouse and clothing store in the small town of Estación La Floresta. Witnesses recalled hearing several loud pops that they initially thought were fireworks, until they heard screaming. Seconds later, the two suspects ran out to a waiting motorcycle, which a third man used to drive them all off. The horrifying gravity of the crime soon became clear. Sadly, the warehouse's 63-year-old owner, Giovanna, her 57-year-old husband, Carlos, and their 37-year-old son, Fabricio, had all been shot and killed. The screaming had come from the only surviving member of the family, Lorena, who apparently witnessed part of the shooting and was also nearly kidnapped. Following the terrible tragedy, investigators were able to identify the motorcycle used in the shooting, which led them to two of the three suspects, identified only as two males, ages 17 and 21. They, in turn, gave police the name of the person who had allegedly planned the whole crime, 35-year-old Claudio Andres Cancelo Roman. By the time authorities connected Cancelo to the triple murder, he had already fled and gone into hiding. Over the next couple of weeks, he posted a series of bizarre and disturbing messages to social media in which he simultaneously declared that he was innocent of the crime, but also taunted police. In one message, he even reportedly threatened to commit another massacre, which, as you might imagine, did not help his claims that he was an innocent man. Anyway, while Cancelo really tried hard to convince investigators that he had fled the country and gone to Brazil, police weren't so sure. As a result, they tapped his cell phone just in case he used it again. The tactic paid off on January 13th, when the 35-year-old ordered pizza to the place he was hiding out. It turned out he was actually at a home in the capital of Montevideo. Authorities raided the residence and were able to take Cancelo into custody. At the time of this recording, the 35-year-old is facing a number of charges, including robbery, aggravated homicide, and a number of weapons offenses. He remains in custody while the investigation continues. Representatives from Japan's Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department say that a man and woman are in custody this week following the disturbing discovery of a missing married couple whose bodies were found underneath their own home. The case began at around 8:50 p.m. on January 16th, when police received a call from the adult son of 55-year-old Norihiro and 52-year-old Kimi Takahashi. The man stated that he had arrived home to find both of his parents missing that night. Chillingly, there were bloodstains near the entrance to their residence. When investigators arrived, they found similar evidence in the home's front hallway, as well as in a number of other places. In some of these spots, it also looked like someone had tried to clean up the blood. The search for the missing husband and wife continued for 2 more days until authorities made a horrifying discovery. Their bodies were found hidden underneath the house below a bathroom floor. Both of them reportedly died from multiple stab wounds, with Norihiro's body in particular showing signs of a struggle. This week, it was announced that 2 arrests had been made in the case in rapid succession. The first suspect to be taken into custody was a 30-year-old woman named Hazel Ann Buguisa Morales. The second was a 34-year-old man named Brian Jefferson Lising de la Cruz. While the nature of Morales and Cruz's relationship is unclear, both are said to be Filipino nationals. Currently, little additional information is available about the case, and so far the suspects have only been charged with abandoning the bodies of the 2 victims. The charges were reportedly filed after authorities obtained CCTV footage of the pair walking near the crime scene on the day of Norihiro and Kimi's disappearances. Both have denied any involvement in the murders. The only other insight we currently have into the case is that Morales apparently used to be in a relationship with the victim's son. Police say that they are currently looking into whether there were any kind of issues between Morales and the victims prior to their deaths. The situation is still developing. Residents of a small English town have reportedly been left saddened and outraged this week following the tragic killing of 4 family members, a crime that allegedly happened just an hour after police ignored an emergency mental health call made by one of the deceased. The tragedy began at around 6 a.m. on January 19th when 45-year-old Bartłomiej Kuczynski called 999 from his home in the town of Costessey, just a few miles outside the city of Norwich. During the call, the father of 2 stated that he was concerned for his mental health and that he was feeling confused. Norfolk police allegedly told him to seek medical attention, but did nothing further to investigate before hanging up. It wasn't until roughly an hour later, when authorities received another 999 call, that they finally decided to go out to the property. This second call was reportedly placed by a dog walker who said that they were concerned about the welfare of those inside the Kuczynski house. Sadly, by the time officers arrived, it was too late. After forcing their way into the residence, they found Bartłomiej dead along with his 2 young daughters and his sister-in-law. The 2 girls have since been identified as 12-year-old Jasmine and 9-year-old Natasha, while the 3rd female victim has been identified as Kenticha Sakpangpanao, a native of Thailand who had been visiting the family to help take care of her nieces. It's now alleged that sometime after placing his 999 call to police that morning, Bartłomiej attacked Kenticha with a knife, killing her. He then murdered both of his daughters before turning his weapon on himself. Currently, the exact circumstances of the killings are not clear, as only Bartłomiej and Kenticha were confirmed to have suffered stab wounds. At the time of the tragedy, Bartłomiej's wife, who is said to be the girls' mother and Kenticha's sister, was apparently at work. While the lack of police response to Bartłomiej's call for help on the morning of January 19th was enough on its own to raise eyebrows, it's now been alleged that the situation could be even more tragic than initially believed. According to reports, the 45-year-old had been asking for help with his ongoing mental health issues for months leading up to the killings, but it's unclear if any was ever provided. In particular, officials say that they are now looking into an incident that occurred weeks earlier in mid-December when Bartłomiej was reported missing. He was reportedly found after a short amount of time wandering around a local wooded area and was taken to a hospital for a mental health assessment. However, apparently he was somehow able to leave unescorted before that assessment was carried out. In the aftermath of this week's tragedy, it was announced that Norfolk police are now being investigated by the Independent Office for Police Conduct in connection with the situation. The department says that they will remain open and transparent during the investigation. However, so far they have declined to speculate as to whether they believe the incident could have been prevented had they responded to the original 999 call. The situation is still developing. Representatives from Spain's civil guard say that a 42-year-old man has confessed to a heinous triple murder this week after he allegedly killed 3 elderly siblings in connection with an unpaid debt that investigators claim is linked to an online romance scam. The disturbing case began sometime on January 18th when the bodies of 2 women and 1 man were discovered in Morata de Tajuña, a small town roughly 19 miles southeast of Madrid. The victims, later identified as siblings 67-year-old Emilia, 74-year-old Ángeles, and 77-year-old José Gutiérrez Ayuso, were found inside of their home. Their bodies were piled together, and their remains had been partially burned. While the order of events in the case is not exactly clear, investigators say that the disturbing discovery was made after neighbors of the 3 siblings reported that they had not seen them in several weeks. Around this same time, a 42-year-old man apparently turned himself into police, claiming that he was the one responsible for the crime. The suspect, identified as a man of Pakistani origin named Dilawar Hussain, allegedly confessed that he had committed the murders because of an unpaid debt that 2 of the victims owed him. He stated that he had gotten to know the siblings while he lived as a tenant in their house for several months, during which time Emilia and Ángeles had asked him for a loan. He had agreed, providing them with an undisclosed sum of money, which he claimed was never paid back. According to reports, the reason the sisters wanted the money was because of a long-running online romance scam that they had been ensnared in. For years, they had been sending huge sums of cash to two men who they believed were their American fiancés. The alleged scammers claimed to be in the US military and were able to bilk Amelia and Ángeles out of an estimated 400,000 euros, or about $436,000 US. After the sisters had drained all of their savings, they had turned to friends, neighbors, and other locals for more money. They continued to try and get money, even after most of these people refused and tried to explain to the sisters that they were being scammed. Even the women's bank reportedly issued them a warning. They wouldn't listen, and at some point had managed to obtain the high-interest loan from Hussein. Apparently, this week's tragedy was not the first time that Hussein had lashed out violently against the family. He was actually arrested and given a 2-year prison sentence in February of 2023 after attacking Amelia twice with a hammer. However, he was reportedly released after just 7 months. Authorities say that the male sibling, Jose, was not involved in the romance scam or the loan with Hussein and suffered from a mental disability. At the time of this recording, the situation is still under investigation, though it's unclear if Hussein has yet been formally charged. Officials in South Africa say that a man is facing dozens of murder and attempted murder charges this week after he allegedly gave a surprise confession during the middle of an ongoing inquiry into the cause of a devastating building fire that took place last summer. The tragedy unfolded in the early morning hours of August 31st, 2023, at a rundown apartment complex in downtown Johannesburg. Emergency responders were called to the scene after smoke and flames were spotted at the building at around 1 a.m. Firefighters arrived to find that the blaze had engulfed a large portion of the complex. Making matters worse, there was no easy water access, meaning that battling the fire was a slow and difficult process. Many of those inside quickly found themselves trapped and were forced to make the terrifying decision to jump from windows several floors up. Parents threw children and babies, praying that they were caught by other survivors on the ground. Sadly, others never even made it that far. In the end, at least 76 people were killed, while nearly 100 others were injured. In the immediate aftermath of the tragedy, which was described as one of the worst in recent memory in the country, a lot of attention was directed at the circumstances that contributed to the deadliness of the incident. In particular, many criticized Johannesburg's well-known and long-running problem with so-called hijacked buildings. These are derelict buildings that are not officially in use, but which are often taken over by criminals. These criminals reportedly use the buildings as a base of operations and as a way to make extra money by renting illegally to people with no other place to go. In the case of the August 2023 tragedy, this was primarily immigrants from places like Malawi, Tanzania, and Zimbabwe, many of whom were reportedly in the country illegally. According to reports, the rundown state of the apartment complex made the incident significantly more deadly than it otherwise would have been. As previously mentioned, there was little to no access to water, and the place also did not have electricity, meaning that many resorted to using candles and other open flames as a source of light. On top of this, fire escapes and other access points to the buildings were locked or chained off, making it significantly harder for people to get out once the blaze began. While all of these details are certainly worthy of discussion and attention, the actual cause of the fire remained unknown for many months afterwards. That was, until this week, when out of nowhere, a suspect offered a shocking confession. According to reports, the confession happened during an inquiry that was set up to investigate the tragedy. During testimony, a 29-year-old man, who so far has only been referred to as Mr. X, allegedly stated that he was responsible for starting the fire. Not only that, he claimed the entire thing was part of a panicked attempt to cover up a murder. Mr. X reportedly told the inquiry panel that on the night of the tragedy, he and a drug dealer at the apartment complex had beaten and strangled a man to death. After the killing, the drug dealer instructed him to get rid of the body. He stated that he took the victim's remains down into the basement of the complex, where he poured gasoline over the body and lit everything with a match. Shortly after this surprise confession, Mr. X was arrested and charged in connection with the August 2023 tragedy. He is now facing 76 counts of murder and 120 counts of attempted murder, as well as arson. At the time of this recording, authorities say that they are now investigating the 29-year-old's claims. The situation is still developing. Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a second to give a huge shout out to everyone who has made it this far into the video. Seriously, thank you so much for watching. If you found today's upload interesting and informative, we'd be honored if you consider liking and subscribing, as well as hitting the notification bell and selecting all notifications to stay up to date with our latest releases. If you're looking for additional ways to help support the channel, we'd love to have you join us over on Patreon. Patrons get ad-free and early access to all of our content, as well as 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. You can learn more at patreon.com/crimezone, where you'll also find some of the fine folks whose names are currently on screen. All that being said, we understand that not everyone has the means to support financially, and that's totally okay. We appreciate every like, sub, share, and comment that you send our way. Once again, thanks so much everyone, and take care.